It's 1867. You're an American with a deeply unpopular president who is arguably making lives worse for Americans. He buys this territory named Alaska from the Russian Empire. In hindsight, Andrew Johnson's purchase of Alaska was a great idea, rare for him. But at the time, purchasing Alaska made no sense. However, the US weren't the first offered the frozen wasteland. Welcome back to my series where I go over an interesting moment in each United States history. Today is Alaska, where I go over the time that we could not even been talking about Alaska, how the United States almost lost Alaska. The Russian Empire had been one of the longest lived successful empires by the time of the mid 1800s. However, the Tsar, or king, Tsar Alexander II, had an issue. He continued on his forefathers' legacy of expansionism of the Russian Empire. However, in 1856, the Russian Empire lost the Crimean War fought in modern day Ukraine. This war had been a massive cost to the Russians, and losing it wasn't exactly helpful. The Russian economy was backwards and stagnant, especially compared to those of Western nations, including the United States. Tsar Alexander II knew that he would go bankrupt if he didn't make a move. In the easternmost part of the empire, Russia had controlled modern day Alaska, a territory reaching down bordering British Columbia. Emphasis on British. By early 1867, Canada had yet to confederate as they would on July 1st. Alexander knew that in result of another war, the Russians would lose their North American colony to the British. And just like France, Spain, or any colonial power, absolutely nobody wanted to give their territory to the British. The Tsar was especially strained with Britain, given that the British were on the winning side with France, the Ottomans, and Sardinia in the Crimean War. The Tsar knew that he had to sell Alaska. He was just too poor. But with the British out of contention, the Tsar wanted to give it to a country that Russia had friendly relations with. So obviously, the Tsar offered it to a sensible nation, Liechtenstein. Yep, Russia offered Alaska to Liechtenstein, a small, double landlocked nation sandwiched between Switzerland and Austria. The only reason the Tsar offered it to Liechtenstein was because he and Prince Johann II of Liechtenstein were close friends. The prince were hesitant to buy the area and refused due to a few simple reasons. Alaska is 9,287 times larger than Liechtenstein, and it was simply too far away. Another reason simply being that Alaska wasn't known to have had gold yet, so it was just seen as a barren wasteland of polar bears. For those reasons, Liechtenstein refused to purchase the territory of Alaska. The Tsar only then asked President Johnson to buy Alaska, to which he accepted in March 1867. The Russians actually held pretty close relations with the US. Alexander backed the Union during the Civil War and even sent Russian warships to New York Harbor and San Francisco Bay to deter any attacks by the Confederate Navy. The territory was sold for 2 cents per acre, 37 cents in 2024, to buy $7.2 million worth of land, or $132 million in 2024. Secretary of State William Seward worked out the deal, and the deal became effective on October 18, 1867. While it was largely popular, some opponents, particularly opponents of President Johnson, named it Seward's Ice Bogs or Johnson's Polar Bear Paradise. When gold was found in Alaska in 1886, the critics were silenced. The Russians, now under Tsar Alexander III, were pretty bummed, and Liechtenstein were kicking themselves realizing they could have been insanely rich had they just said yes. While a Liechtenstein or Alaska would have been insanely funny, at the end of the day, it makes more sense that Alaska belongs to a country closer in proximity. And maybe for the future, it could belong to a country even closer in proximity. Thank you all for watching. Stick around for next time when I go over how Arizona once controlled Las Vegas.